most guys naturally reach out and grab a woman's breast when they're right in front of his face, but it's actually a really sensual experience when you stand behind the woman. This is something where she doesn't know what you're gonna do next, so it adds that anticipation, and that can be really sexy. And when you do that, it releases a chemical in her brain called oxytocin, and that enhances her mood. So by doing this, you're doing foreplay just by massaging her breasts. Another interesting way to switch it up from behind is you can stand in front of the mirror so she can see what you're doing, but it's really sexy to see both of you engaging with each other and seeing what's happening. The nice thing about using your mouth on her breasts is that there's saliva involved, so there's natural lubrication there, and that can feel really nice. The nipple is really sensitive, so if you're using your fingers too much, it can actually start to get irritated, so using your mouth can feel really good, and it's nice to switch it up between the two. I think that it's really good to lick around the skin, not just the nipple area, because there are parts all over her breast that are sensitive, so it can be easy to forget that and focus just on the nipple. Take into account that there is a whole breast. So you have to be really careful when you're using your mouth because you can be inclined to suck really hard, and that can actually hurt her, and that would take away from the mood and could totally derail the situation, so you have to be really careful about that and make sure it's a pleasurable experience. The shower is a great place to play with her breasts because when you're in there, just being in there is something that's really sexy. There's water running down, so that's a natural lubrication, and it's easier to slip around on her breasts. And the hot water is gonna raise her blood pressure and make her skin super sensitive. So when you're touching her breast in there, it's gonna feel extra good versus when she's outside of the shower. When you're in the shower, you also are gonna wanna soap each other up, which is also really sexy. And that's another form of lubrication. If you have a loofah, you could use that, exfoliate her breasts. Just make sure that you're not too rough because a loofah can be harsh on the skin if you push too hard, so just be really gentle, and it can feel really, really nice in the shower. You don't necessarily have to wait until her bra's off to get started with foreplay and touching her breasts. It can feel really interesting to rub above the material. It adds a different sensation to using your hands directly on her skin. So you can play with the materials, you can see what type of bra she's wearing. If it's elasticized, you can run your finger through the elastic and tease her that way, and maybe feel with your fingers directly on her skin, then come back out and touch her on top of the material and play around with the different sensations. While this feels really nice for a short period of time, it can start to chafe or feel uncomfortable if you do it for too long. So think of this as something to do in the beginning before just ripping her bra off. It's something that can switch it up and feel really good. Don't continue this long term. It can start to feel a little weird. We know what motorboating is, as it's made its way into the mainstream and frat boy movies like Wedding Crashers. But the reality is that motorboating is not likely going to feel that good for her. It's more of a comedic action. It's something I wouldn't recommend doing if you just start seeing a girl. It's something she might take the wrong way and think that you are objectifying her, maybe don't respect her, because it can feel a bit demeaning. But it is something that can be fun and playful if you do it in the right situation with the right girl. She would definitely have to have the same sense of humor as you if you're gonna try something like that. The skin all over the breast is sensitive, so if you're motorboating, you're making this weird sensation with your lips, and I feel like that can be a bit ticklish too, so if she's giggling, that can also lead to arousal. So it could be a really positive thing or it could be a really negative thing. There are two extremes, just approach motorboating with caution. If you're gonna go with a little more rough movement, then you have to make sure that you also incorporate some gentle touch, because women really appreciate some tenderness. This is a situation where you have to really think about what she wants and what feels good for her. So it feels really nice to just caress her breasts gently, to touch them in a really soft way. You can give her a massage, but really softly. She does like when you alternate between something a little rough and a little soft, so it's really important to remember that she likes it when you're gentle. Don't worry so much about over-romanticizing the moment or being super emotional. This is a situation where you just want to be soft and gentle and then move on. A lot of women's arousal is actually a mental game. So teasing her is going to incorporate some anticipation, and that's going to automatically set the mood and get her really into it. So if you're touching her really lightly with a feather or an ice cube, or even with your hands, just really gently, just holding it up to her breast so you're barely touching it, that can feel really nice. Women have microscopic hairs around the circumference of their nipples. So if you're just grazing them lightly, it's gonna shoot sensation into her whole body. And this is gonna feel amazing, even though you're barely touching her. By holding back, you're gonna create this major anticipation, and she's gonna really, really want you. And I'm sure this is something that you want. So it's really good to incorporate different types of sensations, gentle, rough. Rough is definitely something that you want to think about and keep in mind, but you have to make sure that you're not rough from beginning to end. A woman's arousal will increase exponentially if you just build up to more aggressive touching and feeling and caressing. When it comes to being rough and aggressive, you really have to take cues from her, because some girls are going to be more into rough play and other girls are going to be really into more gentle, soft caresses. If you're being more aggressive and she's reacting positively, then go for it. Definitely continue doing that. If she seems to be squirming in a not so positive way, then definitely pay attention and stop. You can ask her if she likes it and go with how she's responding. If you're being rough, you have to make sure that you're incorporating some gentleness as well. You can lead up to it by being gentle and then rough, or you can go back and forth, but make sure you're not rough from beginning to end. The main reason is because breasts are super sensitive and they can't really handle it. Even if she likes it when you're rough during sex, you have to be really careful with the breasts. A lot of men think of nipples as buttons, and while they are hot buttons and they feel really good, they're not actually buttons or dials. You shouldn't be poking them, you shouldn't be twisting them too hard. You have to be really careful because they're very sensitive and they're major erogenous zones. So while it can feel really good, there's a fine line between pleasure and pain, so you have to be really careful with that. Gentle tugging can feel really nice. You have to be really aware of what you're doing and be cautious that you're not pulling too hard, because that can just feel awful. But it is a sensation that feels really good if you pay close attention to do it softly and gently. I would say that the sensitivity of a woman's nipples are pretty subjective, and it kind of depends on the woman. The general rule of thumb is that larger nipples are more sensitive because they have more nerve endings. So if she has larger nipples, you have to be more careful. It's natural that guys tend to focus on the nipple because that's what's staring right at you, but other areas of the breast around the nipple are also really sensitive and worth paying attention to. The top part of the breast above the nipple is actually proven to be the most sensitive part of the breast. So it's really important to make sure that you are gentle, you are tender, you give her breasts some love in a really soft and sensual way. I know you love the nipple, but the rest of the breast is just as important, if not more important.